This is No Operating Manual, a podcast about building healthcare companies when there's no one clear path and no operations manual. My guest today is Adeel Malik, co-founder and CEO of ClearStep. For the past 7 years, he's been building what is described as the digital front door of healthcare. ClearStep began as a digital triage company, but his trajectory was accelerated in the early days of COVID, when the team built and deployed a screening tool in a matter of days to help health systems separate emergency cases from people who could safely stay home. Since then, the company has expanded into helping patients move from a question to a clear next step within the health system. Adeel's background includes medical research at Johns Hopkins and healthcare consulting with Accenture. Across those roles, his focus has been consistent, making complicated healthcare systems easier to navigate. Adeel, thank you for joining me on No Operating Manual.
Thanks so much for having me. Excited for the conversation.
So we'll get into it. ClearStep started in 2018, so before COVID and before AI was being thrown around to really gain credibility. Tell us what you were trying to solve for in 2018 and what that looks like in 2026.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I mean, there's been an evolution, I think, for sure, in how we think about the problem, space, and opportunity. But I do think that the core mission and what we've been trying to achieve that whole time has been pretty consistent, which is going after the problem of how do you make it an order of magnitude easier for patients to find, access, book the optimal care for them. So I think what's changed is the nuance to which we understand how to actually solve that problem, given the existing systems and broader ecosystem that exists, market adoption, market readiness, I think, for actually advancing solutions that attempt to do that in meaningful ways, and relatedly, market pressures to move to solve these problems. But I think that the core mission of like right care, right time, right provider has actually been, frankly, surprisingly consistent. Because you might expect a bit more pivoting in that time. But I think everyone has known for longer than 2018 that it is too hard to navigate to the truly optimal site of care, to know when exactly to get care based on your real clinical needs, to know what is really the optimal path considering your health insurance, to know who's actually available near you that has the right level of clinical expertise, to be able to like streamline that path from like need to actually getting what you need. And so we've known that's been a problem, but I think actually in light of knowing that that's been a problem, it's almost like, why hasn't there been a solution? Why isn't there a clear solution? Well, because it's really complicated to figure out how do you deliver something that meaningfully solves that problem at scale within the existing framework. So I think it's been that consistent mission, but we've gotten a lot more nuanced in our understanding of like, how do you actually accomplish that.
So when you launched and then the pandemic hit, and you had built and launched a COVID triage tool.
Right.
And you did that in a very short amount of time. So in that kind of pressure tested, what did you learn about your product and about the health systems in that very short amount of time?
Well, the interesting thing is we had already built up some core technology that was trying to accomplish the same thing of triage and care routing broader than just COVID. So part of the reason why we were able to move so quickly to solve is because we had existing technology, clinical content, and knowledge bases that allowed us to move rapidly. I think the thing that we took away and carried forward from that experience, and people talk about this all the time, like, oh, we saw that the healthcare industry can move fast to solve problems. People can make kind of quick decisions to implement new technology. And so like that was good to see and understand. But I'll say it was not straightforward as to how to like create that feeling, impetus, energy to continue moving at that kind of pace once the pandemic settled down. It did just take this very macro level force to get people to move quickly to solve very acute challenges around triage and virtual care and the kind of systems that were set up really, really quickly. And we see this with telemedicine too, where like virtual care adoption was like going crazy. And it was like, and then it just like fell steeply. So it really started, it begged the question, like people were really optimistic in like 21, probably around 2021, where it was like, wow, like the healthcare industry can move fast. But then we like fell right back into, and in 2022 and 23, we fell right back into the very slow, um, moving procurement processes. So I think it was not, we did learn a lot from those experiences. Almost honestly, I think we overestimated how much we learned a bit, like going into 2022 and thinking that like, okay, we can keep that speed going. So I'm happy to like dig into that a little bit more. It's like, how now looking back, how do we actually think we kind of carry forward those learnings? But yeah, it was really interesting. Like we did learn a lot, and I do think, but in the immediate time of it, I think we actually overestimated how much we could take away from it.
Do dig into that, because it's really interesting that you say that you kind of 22, everybody kind of took a step back and said, okay, let's level set. Let's, figure out next steps forward. Do you think that was because of decision fatigue, or do you think that was because there were so many different options on the market?
I think it had to do with a couple things. One, I think my experience is from the window of selling, particularly into health systems. Health systems had all of a sudden in 2022, COVID funding dried up, their elective procedures were down, like everyone was losing money like crazy. And so that also created this big negative force against doing anything new. But I think that ultimately the key lesson out of it all was that it, which is no surprise, and every founder knows this and is trying to chase this, that it is all about solving an acute problem that the system, that the customer organization is really feeling now, and is a top, 3 priority for who you're trying to solve to. And during COVID, it was that. What we were offering was that. And as we tried to continue pushing the broader care routing, care navigation solution, part of the challenge was people were continuing to say, yeah, these, navigation, right care, right time, getting people in, utilizing our clinical resources most effectively, top priorities. And you could look at so much data, so survey data, whatever, and see that like, oh yeah, we're hitting the top priority. So sometimes it is about timing. Where like 22 was a tough year. I think, to try to sell into health systems when like 70% of them were in the red. But what kind of came out of that and was that we developed, I think, particularly into 23, a much more nuanced understanding of how you tie our product use case and workflow in much more specific, detailed ways to the actual P&L of the customer, and really be able to tie the way the product works to how it will impact your financials, which sometimes certain products, it's a lot easier. I mean, RCM, like sometimes it's clear. We help you collect more money in the claims process. We reduce denials. But other times it's not as straightforward, even though people recognize that there is a lot of value in it. And I think that like as we continue to go deeper with existing customers, the good thing was out of those few years of COVID, we gained a lot of customers that stuck around. So that stuck around. And so we were able to continue going deeper and learning about their systems. I think the ability to, again, this is like something I think most founders really appreciate and keep top of mind, but is worth overemphasizing, is you just have to be able to go so deep into the value creation opportunity, really tie it to details on value creation in either revenue or cost. And the better and better you can do that and really know and understand how your product works in those customer journeys, user journeys, technology workflows to actually achieve what you're saying is a revenue or cost opportunity, the better you can do that, the easier it will be to sell. Like, and so there's just a lot, especially as a first time founder, there's a lot you learn about how to sell effectively when you're just like doing it by trial and by fire, especially selling into like some of the most complex bureaucratic organizations that just exist, period. Happy to go further into that as well, but I'll pause there
No,
for
I
your
think that's
thoughts.
actually that's a good place. I think you're seeing the dynamic between the benefit of a friction or a less friction experience versus what are the true cost savings of a product like yours. And so in doing that, so I've heard that you have done the user testing where you've asked patients what they planned on doing, what
Mhm.
their next steps were before showing ClearStep's recommendation for next steps. And most often, the patient's next steps were actually more clinically involved, I guess is what I would
Mm,
kind of rational it.
yeah.
So, what did that reveal about that decision making? And then have you been able to develop, again, going back to that cost savings, have you been able to develop a cost savings based on helping people make better decisions?
Yeah. So really interesting and awesome that you came across that study. It's one of the most important that we've done, where like you outlined, Erin, we ask patients before, as they use our technology, which is asking them questions about their clinical conditions and current presenting symptoms to make sure we know where exactly to send them in the system. We ask people what their pre-intent, before we say what you should do, what are you currently thinking about doing, compare that to what we recommended and what actually happens. And yeah, we've seen over half the time consistently, tens of thousands of data points on just these kind of trials that we've done, that over half the time patients are wrong. They're either too acute or not seeking enough care. They'll say, I'm planning to stay at home, and they really should at least do a virtual visit or maybe go to urgent care. And then vice versa, patients are saying, go to urgent care, and you could do that over telemedicine, or you really do need to, or they're saying telemedicine and they should go in person because there will need to be diagnostic exams. So one way or the other, we were attempting to escalate or de-escalate them. And to your point, the majority of the time it is de-escalation when they get it wrong, to kind of bring them to less acute sites of care. And what's been so interesting about this analysis is, even pretty recently, we did like really deep dives into the financial impacts, the contribution margin impact of taking someone who said they were going to go to emergency room when they really needed a primary care visit, and really modeling out, like, if when low acuity patients with those insurance types go into ER, what happens versus when you send them to primary care. And the most incredible insight out of this is the value of redirecting care more appropriately is really significant, both in fee-for-service contexts and in value-based care contexts. So almost all the time, it creates financial value to reroute the care. So, for example, that may seem a little bit counterintuitive to say, well, why would rerouting a patient from ER to primary care make money for the system? But when you actually model it all out, those patients who are low acuity patients in the ER, they almost always lose money, or they make very little money because it's expensive to deliver that care. And you actually make more of a margin when you send that person to less acute sites of care. And then, obviously the reverse is true. If someone, you'll make more money if you raise the acuity appropriately, but then all those combinations of rerouting almost always also save money from the payer context, where even when you're escalating care for someone who really does need to go to urgent care and they would have just stayed at home, it's a short-term hit. But if you model over a 12-month horizon, it'll save money because you're preventing downstream inappropriate activity. So it's so interesting, like, just this concept of right care, right time creates revenue opportunity in fee-for-service contexts and creates cost-saving opportunity in value-based contexts. And honestly, the ability to even model all of that out, to tie it to the financials, to like go as deep into all of it, some of building in healthcare is just a time thing. It takes time to like build up that level of integration with customers, to be able to get access to all of that kind of data, to be able to like really model it out really well and know how it's impacting the system. The faster you can get there to like this level of granularity, obviously the better for your business. But we felt it just took some time to like get to the point where we could even have access to this level of insight. But it's been really amazing to see the impact of these sites where it's like, it doesn't even matter what the payer context is. Like, it's better to make sure people are utilizing resources optimally.
Also wonder if there's a downstream effect of that patient's choices as they move forward
Mm,
with any healthcare choices that they make. So
right,
in that instance, maybe you're rerouting them to
right.
primary care, but down in the future, they may decide, okay, well, I've been to this primary care or I've been to this telehealth. I'm going to do that instead of going down the path of emergency care or something like that. So you're reinforcing that
Yeah,
change of behavior, but of course you can't get in people's head to be able to share that. So
yeah.
maybe
Hard
next
to
time.
model. Hard to model that. But yes, I do think there is an element of like behavior change too, and reinforcement learning through the process as well.
Yeah. So there's a lot of buzz around AI chat in healthcare, but
Yeah.
adoption is still fairly low. Why do you think there's such a gap between what is the hype and what's actually been
Yeah.
deployed?
Well, I think it comes down to what we've already been talking about, which is systems are in a place right now where they actually are very willing to move forward on new initiatives and use AI and build it into workflows. Frankly, I think ambient opened the door for other kinds of AI companies. The scale at which it's been adopted and the value that systems have been seeing has created this like mindset and culture, particularly again with health systems, that they're willing. But there will be a lot of scrutiny on the actual ROI. I think systems have gotten a lot more sophisticated at evaluating the value creation opportunity. I think 10 years ago, systems were more willing to invest in, innovative technologies that they were like, okay, well, yes, this directionally, we know we need to make care easier to access. So let's make sure we invest in our provider data infrastructure and make sure that it's clean, and we'll spend a bunch of money on it because like we know that directionally this is correct, and that we need to go in this direction. They weren't super concerned about tying that initiative to like really clear, like, okay, X plus Y led to like this exact. I don't think we're in those days right now. I think there's a willingness to buy, but you really need to like we've been talking about, you need to be able to articulate a pretty linear path from what you're doing to the impact on the financials. And so I think there are a lot of AI use cases that don't have that yet. And I think as they do, and the emphasis to anyone building now is do whatever you, and there are a lot of cool tools now where you can build projections using GPT. You can pull down, you can make guesses that are pretty informed at things. You can build models in ways that were like harder to do before, that allow you to articulate. But yeah, I think it's like even the example you're saying, like, oh, and it may lead to these other downstream effects. The problem is they're hard to model. And so I think too many companies rely on value creation potential or value levers that are a little bit more abstract. And like, you can buy that. You can be like, yeah, that makes sense. But if you can't actually tie it to the dollar, like people aren't willing to invest there. And it's because they know they've implemented now a few technologies that are AI driven that have had very direct linear, like logically linear paths to the value creation. So now they want that. Like, that's the mental model. Let's implement things like that. So if you're not there, it's super hard to get people to buy.
So you're saying that adoption is happening, but it has to be really more
Yeah.
crystal clear about the ROI.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if ClearStep's long-term vision plays out, which is, integrated scheduling, pricing transparency, chronic care follow-up, what does ClearStep look like, or what does the healthcare front door look like 5 years from now?
Yeah. I think that 5 years from now, you should be able to interface with an AI care navigator, care guide, AI nurse that would be able to, one, hopefully autonomously resolve as much of things as it can itself. And this would be via voice, via chat, like via suggestions from your Aura Ring or from your smartwatch, where you are able to get immediate resources more quickly. A lot of that is already there. Actually, I think the value is in the more complex cases where you need a specialist or you have a bit more of a complex care path. That's where there's usually a lot of messiness. There's prior auths. It's complicated to like figure out. I think what will happen is those paths become much more streamlined for patients. So on the patient side, it's about when I need care, again, fundamentally the same mission. When I need care, no matter what it is, it's a really clean path to get from like, where do I go? What do I need to like, okay, you have the care, it's booked, you know how much it'll cost, it's in network, etc. On the system side is where I think it's like really, I think hopefully very transformational in how they approach care. It's I think a much more intelligent, sometimes what we call brain for access to care, meaning the brain that's running scheduling, that's running the AI voice when you call, that's even powering the call center agent's experience when they're talking to you is super intelligent to really be able to, one, understand the patient need, but then two, be able to look into its own supply of resources, the providers, the facilities, the diagnostics, all of the stuff it has to offer, and be able to surface it up in clean, easy ways where it is all optimized. You minimize all of this inappropriate use of specialty care. Part of the problem that we see is like the systems have very little capacity, especially on the on specialty care side. But at the same time, 40% of that care is not really needed by those providers. So you really need to get better at shuffling and shifting that around. And this infrastructure layer is what's needed to actually make the patient changes. So the patient changes you feel as a consumer, as a healthcare consumer, as a patient, but to actually enable, and this is where I think our insights have developed and gotten way deeper, where it's like we really understand how do the scheduling systems work, how does contact center and access center really work, what should the logic look like for how you route patients from A to B, because all of this like plumbing of healthcare, that's actually how you solve the problems that we're trying to solve. And I think that's where we've gotten a lot more intelligent about where to focus and how to really create paradigm shifting technologies. Fundamentally, what will it look like? What we've been marching towards, that we feel it, that it's easier to get the care that you need. It's more directed. It's more transparent. You understand the costs around it, and there are quicker paths from, feeling unwell or having a care need and actually getting it fulfilled. Short answer. I'll actually maybe add one more thing, which I think we're working on as the more aspirational path, but there are very real paths that are developing towards it, which is we just saw in Utah, Doctronic got approval to be able to do like AI refills. And it's a really cool initial use case where you see AI moving beyond what I've been describing as just like this matchmaker and router and into the actual care delivery processes. And so one thing that we hope that we'll get to pioneer in just these coming years is you should be able to talk to an AI and for it to be able to say, look, we know that you need this blood test or this x-ray or this kind of imaging, and that's really going to be your first step based off of everything that you've told us. Why shouldn't you be able to skip that first visit, get the blood test, get the imaging, and then have a virtual visit with a provider with that initial diagnostics being prescribed by an AI and actually prescribed? So this is something we're actually working on right now, where it's like you should be able to skip that first visit altogether and be able to just go to Quest or go to diagnostics and get on a virtual visit, because so many outpatient visits, we've all experienced this, is great, can't actually do anything yet, go do this, and then I'll review that and then figure out what you need. So that's something even more that's like the big kind of like big vision type stuff that we're working on as well, that would really fundamentally change. Imagine the FDA approved that kind of solution and it would really change all of outpatient care.
Thinking about the health systems themselves and the impacts of rural health, especially, and the adoption of digital navigation or any of these types of tools, what happens to a health system that doesn't get better at this over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah.
And how do we help make sure that doesn't happen?
Yeah. Well, I think that the short answer is the health systems that are prone to this kind of risk of like not having enough patient volume to be able to support themselves and need to make sure they're positioned to be able to intake new novel solutions, which is tough given positioning. But I think on the other side of things, on the tech side, I think there's three sides of things. On the tech side of things, like we're trying to focus in some of those areas as well, which can be hard because you naturally start gravitating towards like the urban suburban centers where like those systems frankly have more resources to even be able to invest in innovative things. But certain partners of ours like Ochsner, operates in Louisiana, like bad payer mix, like tough to make, but they do really well and they're really innovative. And so it's partners like that that are actually creating paths even for companies like ClearStep to really implement, prove out technology that can be taken to places where there is even more of a healthcare need and healthcare deserts. But I think the third side is on the government side. And I think the federal government is actually thinking a lot about and trying to put forward pathways to solve some of these impending crises in like rural America and healthcare deserts. One in particular is there's a federal agency called ARPA, and right now actively there's the biggest federal grant for AI and medicine being contemplated that will be awarded just in a couple months. It's like $450 million total grant, and part of it is very focused on how do you create AI agents that can ensure that care delivery is actually happening at optimal levels particularly in healthcare deserts and rural areas. So I think there does need to be, with this kind of moment of what's happening, there needs to be coordination and collaboration between the government, between the actual institutions, the care delivery institutions themselves, and the technology players all together to understand how do we do this. And actually, ARPA is, for those that don't know about it, I mean, it's pretty late to like get into it at this point, but even just knowing that these kinds of programs are happening where like the federal government is looking at how do we create pathways for AI agents to become autonomous, to be able to do autonomous care delivery. That is actually happening right now. So there are paths. Well, we'll see how it all unfolds.
So 7 years into founding ClearStep, what is your biggest pain point now versus when you first launched?
I think now it's big execution mode. It's like we have a lot of clarity on how to solve these problems. There's a lot more work to do though, and we don't know everything. We're going to continue to learn, but I will say it is about actually, I would say honestly, seizing the opportunity that is in front of us with some of how we framed it earlier, the market opportunity, the way the technology has evolved, the readiness to actually adopt it. Whereas earlier on, it's like figuring all that out. It's like, we know we have an idea, we know it's directionally correct, but like, how do we really tie it into the actual user journeys and workflows and other systems and enable it to truly solve the problem that we know exists. So, and repeat founders often are able to move a lot faster on that path, to be totally honest. I think some of this too is like figuring, we were 25 when we started the company. It's like figuring out how to actually build up a company that can solve meaningful problems in healthcare. It's not easy. So a lot of sympathy out to people in the early days and trying to figure all of that out.
So on that same topic, any advice that you would offer that new healthcare founder that's launching now?
I think it's what I've been saying. Move a lot faster and take it way more seriously. If you haven't already, literally try to download your customers' financials and like actually really model out how does what you are building directly tie to very specific line items in those. Like if you haven't done that, you need to do that now, because that will unlock a lot of insight in how you message and how you integrate, how you position, who you even need to talk to at those organizations. And honestly, I think a lot of founders don't actually go through that like really detailed, like you can generate a really easy ROI model, maybe with like 5 or 6 lines in Excel, but like you need to like dig in the way a CFO would or a controller would into the financials and really tie what you're doing to them. I think practically that's something that would, I think, have huge impact.
Thank you, Adeel, for all of your advice and for sharing ClearStep's story. I appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to No Operating Manual. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support the podcast, please leave a rating and a review, and don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. No Operating Manual is hosted and produced by Erin O'Brien of Chemistry, a healthcare marketing and communication advisory. Visit our website at choosechemistry.com.